It starts with acknowledging that every milestone of civilization, the end of slavery, democracy, equal rights for men and women, the welfare state as we have it now, these were all utopian fantasies once. Utopias become real all the time. Real change never comes from the center. It always comes from the fringes, where the crazy people are, you know? And then these ideas start going towards the center. It starts with the people who are first dismissed as unreasonable, lunatics. They're unrealistic, their plans are unaffordable, and that's where it starts. Most people want to make something of their lives. Most people have ambitions, are creative, are altruistic. You know, there are very deep evolutionary roots for all this behavior. And it matters what we assume in each other. So if we assume that most people are creative, are altruistic, are full of empathy, then that's what we get. But what do? We create a welfare state, we create a democracy, etc. that is based on the idea that most people are selfish. Well, guess what happens? You know, that's what you get out of people if you do that. Let's turn it completely around. What if we say to everyone, especially the poor and the working poor, what if we say, well, I think you've got great ideas, you just lack the means. Here are the means. I'm very curious to see what you'll come up with. And that's basic income. It's very simple. We've come to live in what you could call an inverse welfare state. The story that we are told is that there are a lot of very productive, ambitious people on the top, and they earn a lot of money, but they also pay a lot of taxes, and we should be grateful for them.
Because ultimately they're wealth creators.
Exactly. But if you look what is really happening in the economy, for example, when you just ask people themselves, do you think your job is useful or not? Then you'll find out that many of these so-called wealth creators, they think that their job is utterly bullshit. There is an almost perfect correlation that the more money you earn, the more likely it is that you think that your own job doesn't have much of value. I'm not talking about the teachers or the garbage collectors or the nurses. I'm talking about consultants, corporate lawyers, bankers. These are the people who often tend to think that their job doesn't have much of value. 3-4 centuries ago, most wealth came from the land, right? If you owned the land, you were rich and you could just sit back and relax because everyone would pay rent to you. Nowadays, real estate and the land is still important. You know, it's still an important source of wealth and inequality. But there are other things as well. If you own money, if you own technologies, if you own knowledge, etc., you can rentier on that as well. But the crazy thing is that we often use the language of work and creativity and wealth creating to describe what is in fact just sitting back and doing nothing and just collecting these rents. The most pernicious example of it is the internet economy. You know, Google, Facebook, Amazon, these are all rentier companies. What they basically do is they let us pay to access our content that we provide to them for free. You know, Google and Facebook, they get about, 60-70% of all advertising revenue these days because they have huge monopoly power. People often ask me, when can we introduce something like a basic income? You know, when will we be rich enough? Do we have to wait for the robots or something like that will take all our jobs? And I always say that the real obstacle towards moving to a society like that is not about economics. It's not a financial problem. It's an ideological problem. So we need to update our ideas about what work is. Now, what I always emphasize is that a basic income pays for itself because healthcare costs go down, crime goes down, kids perform much better in school. This is what we find in every single basic income experiment. It is cheaper to eradicate poverty than to combat the symptoms of poverty. If you look at the US, for example, a floor in the income distribution that would completely get rid of poverty would be about $300-400 billion, while the cost of child poverty was recently calculated at $500 billion. So as I said, $500 billion to combat the symptoms of child poverty, $300-400 billion to eradicate poverty. It's not rocket science, you know? So who will pay for this basic income? I think that it should be paid out of these rents.
Which rents?
I mean, we live in a renter society because we've become so rich in the past 2 decades, and 200 years, you could even say. Most of the wealth comes from rents from the past, right? We've been given this huge gift. We are richer, wealthier, healthier than ever. And we didn't work for it. So you could see a basic income as a dividend of progress. Because our forefathers worked so hard, we can now afford to give everyone a dividend like that. It's just nowadays only the rich receive it, right. But we could share that equally. It's interesting that when you start talking in the language of money, then and you say, well, basic income costs this and that, many billions of dollars or euros or pounds, then suddenly we start thinking that we can't afford to do something about this. Look at something like unemployment. If you have a country where millions of people don't work, That's not a good thing, right? Everyone understands that. That's a waste of human capital, human ambition, talent, etc. But what did we do in Greece? I mean, the European Commission and Union basically destroyed Greece because it wanted to have their money back. Basically what you're doing, you're kicking a beggar in the face and saying, give me my money back, and then you're suddenly surprised that you don't get any money back. Obviously they don't get your money back, they don't have a job. The crazy thing is that nowadays, people are forced to sit in an office, send emails to people they don't like, write reports no one is ever going to read.
Shop on Amazon.
And we call that work? You know, what is it? Is that wealth creating? Obviously it's not. So we need to work less, do less paid work in order to do more. Look what's happening right now. We've got the graying of society, you know, more and more older people in our society. What is it really important? Well, that we care for them. Who's doing all this caring? Well, obviously, nurses are incredibly important, but volunteers as well. And there are so many people in their 30s or in their 40s who have both to care for their kids and for the elderly. This is the great challenge. Meanwhile, they're most of their time in those offices doing those useless stuff that they don't care about. And it's not me saying it, it's people themselves saying it. That's the crazy thing, you know, when historians will look back on our time, they'll think, what kind of bizarre religion was this? That people were all sitting in, you know, a room together with each other and, you know, sending messages and having meetings, and no one really knew what was going on and why it was all for. Psychologists call it pluralistic ignorance. We all think that someone is in charge and someone knows what this is all for. And everyone thinks that of each other. And then you just need one or two people who say, why do we actually do this? And then everyone's like, yeah, I was wondering that as well.